Hello everyone, my name is Brad and welcome to Mediocre Models. In this video I'm going to show how I would paint my US paratroopers in the mid to late war uniform using contrast paints. The model I'll be using is this one. He's been undercoated in Corax white, and for contrast paints I have militarum green, skeleton horde, creed camo, Gorgon Fur, wyldwood, snakebite leather, Plaguebearer Flesh and Gilman Flesh. Then I have leadbelcher for any of the metallic areas. I also have castellan green here, which I'm not going to use on this particular model, but if I was going to use it, I would use it for any of the models that just have a regular steel helmet like this one. But because he has the netting on his helmet, I won't be using that. So yeah, castellan green for any of them that just have the regular steel helmet. And then I have nuln oil and agrax earthshade for shades at the end. So this is one I've already previously painted up, just a test model, see how it turns out. So I'll get set up with the first paint and then we can get started. The first colour I'll use will be militarum green, and this will be for the bulk of the uniform. So it'll be for his pants as well as his shirt. If you can, try to avoid getting it onto the webbing and the pack and that, as it'll just make moving on to the next step a bit easier to paint them. But if you do get it on, no big problem. You just have to go through with your Corax white and just touch it up a little bit, and then you can move on to the next colour. As you can see, it'll just go all over his pants as well as his shirt. I'll continue on and I'll finish that and let that dry. And once he's all done, we can come back and move on to the next colours. Now that the militarum green is dry and I've done a little bit of cleanup on his webbing, the next colour I'll move on to will be skeleton horde. And with this, I'll put it over all of his equipment, on his backpack and his entrenching tool handle and that, as well as over his ammo pouches, and the straps over the front of his uniform. And if you have any with these medical pouches on the helmets as well, I'll also put it over that. This will just go all over. So I'll continue on with this, and once that's dry we can move on to the next colour. While the skeleton horde is still drying a little bit, the next colour I'll move on to will be creed camo, and this will just be for his helmet. So if you have any with the netting, it'll just go on that. Putting it on, if you have any with the medical pouches, just try and be careful and not get it on. Once this is dry, I will go back with Corax white and fix up his straps on the front and back of his helmet before we move on to the next colour. Now that the creed camo is dried and I've fixed up his straps across his helmet, the next colour I'll move on to will be Gorgon Fur, and using this I'll paint in his boots. Be careful, try not to get onto other parts of the uniform. I'll also paint it on the straps for his helmet, and if any of them have got straps on their weapons, like straps hanging down and that, I'll also paint it onto that. Don't forget the strap across the back, or if they've got them hanging down on the sides. So I'll continue on that, and then once that's dry we can move on to the next colour. While the Gorgon Fur is still drying a little bit, the next colour I'll move on to will be wyldwood, and I'll use this for any of the handles of the entrenching tools. Quick and simple. The next colour I'll move on to will be snakebite leather, and using this I'll paint in any wooden areas on their weapons. The rifles are to be the main part of the rifle, but for any of the SMGs or BARs, it'll probably just be the stock. Once I've finished this and let this dry, I'll go through with Corax white and fix up his skin before we move on to the final couple of colours. Now that the snakebite leather is dry and I've fixed up the areas of his skin with Corax white, the next colour I'll move on to will be Plaguebearer Flesh. Now this is sort of an optional sort of thing. You don't have to do this if you don't want. I'm going to put this over his equipment and his webbing, just to give it that sort of faded green khaki look. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. You could just leave it the skeleton horde, just leave it sort of this desert yellow colour. But I like the way that this looks, so I put it onto my miniatures. So this will just go over all of his equipment on the back here, as well as all the webbing that goes around his front, and the straps go across the front. And you can also put it over his little medical pouch, but I won't do that. I'll just leave it the skeleton horde, just so it breaks it up a little bit and it has a little bit of different colour to it. Yep, he's all done. So I'll let that dry and then we can move on to the next colour. The next colour I'll move on to will be Gilman Flesh, and this will just be for all of these flesh. This will be the last of the contrast paints. So after this is all applied, and after it's dried, I will move on to leadbelcher, and then we can do the metallics, and then it'll just be shades at the end. As you can see, it'll just go onto his face and his hands. So I'll continue on and finish off the last of his flesh and let that dry, and then once it's done, we'll come back and do the metallics. And now with the Gilman Flesh basically all dry, the next colour I'll move on to will be leadbelcher, and this will be for any metallic areas. So that'll be a little buckle on the front, as well as any clips on his webbing, and on his backpack. And his boots. And I like to paint the metallic areas on the weapons as well, because I like the way it looks. So I'll continue on and finish this, and once it's all dry, I can move on to the shades. Now that the metallic areas are all dry, the first shade I'll move on to will be nuln oil, and this will just be to shade all the metallic areas. So if you've painted the weapons like I have, it'll just be all over the metal on the weapons. but otherwise it'll just be all the metallic areas for his clips, for his shoes and his webbing, and his backpack. After the nuln oil's all dry, we'll let that dry. After it's all been applied, sorry. And then we'll move on to the final shade. Now that the nuln oil is all dry, the next colour I'll move on to will be agrax earthshade, and this will just be a shade all over the entire model. Putting it on, try to avoid any major pooling, and if you've painted the weapons like I have, try to avoid getting it onto any of the major metallic areas. And this will just really dull down all the colours, tie it all in together nicely, but it'll also give it that really dirty, war-torn, battled feel to them, which I really like the look of. It makes them look like they've been in war, been out in the field fighting for quite some time. It just makes them look a bit better to me, at least I think it does. So now that that's all done, I'll just let him dry, and then once he's fully dry, we can come and take a final look at him, see how he looks, and that'll be it. So I'll let that dry and I'll see you in a bit. Now that the agrax earthshade is almost fully dry, it's only some parts in the deepest areas are still drying a little bit. This is what he looks like. As you can see, the last shade really toned down all the colours, helps tie it all in together nicely, but it also gives them that sort of dirty, war-torn look, which I really like the look of. I like to paint all my models like that. Just makes them look a little bit more real, and I think it makes them look good. So yeah, so that's how I'd paint my mid to late war US paratroopers. Like I said before, when doing the equipment and the webbing, you don't have to put the Plaguebearer Flesh on. You could leave it the skeleton Horde, and just leave it that desert yellow color like his little medical pouch. But I like the Plaguebearer Flesh with the slightly faded green khaki look. So yeah, so that's what he looks like, and all that's left to do now is to base him up, and he's ready to take the fight to the Germans. So yeah, so hope you liked that, and hope you learnt something, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.